Or I think we're recording.
I think we're recording. We are. We're for sure recording. How are you,
Perfect.
Marley?
I am freezing. How are you?
Same. It's been a really fun couple of weeks to be on international calls because there doesn't get as cold as it does here in Kansas City. And so when I get on and I'm like, here's my Fahrenheit temperature, and then I convert it into like mega negative Celsius, they all just lose their minds.
I was talking to somebody about it today, how I just haven't really gone outside. And they're like, but wasn't it cold when you lived in Seattle? And no, we would have weeks where it would be like a 3 degree temperature variation, usually in the 40s and 50s. And I like that.
Yeah.
It's a wet cold, but it's
Yeah.
better than this. Like, it was 6 degrees the other morning when I went to take Daisy May out. It was wild.
Fahrenheit. Yes. But you've been writing pretty well. Didn't I see you get out the other day?
I did, and I just went to the coffee shop on my bike, so I know that for my mental health, I have to get fresh air, and it helps that it's sunny.
Yeah.
But I hate it, and I've worn base layers more than I ever have in my entire life. I don't ever wear them, and now
Good
I
tip.
live in them. So,
Yeah, that's fair. I am sitting at my desk with a heated blanket on my lap. So
well, we're not here
I
to talk about the cold, and one of
we're
our
not.
guests is shaking their heads at us because I think they really love the cold. Let's get on with the show.
Let's do it. We're going to talk about leading inclusive rides. And we brought two of our All Bodies on Bikes wonderful leaders.
But you might be saying, like, okay, how to lead an inclusive ride. That's like All Bodies on Bikes 101. Like, do we really need a whole podcast about this? But honestly, yes. I think a lot of us have had the experience where we go to something that they say is an inclusive ride or is an inclusive event, and then you're like, I don't feel welcome or included here, or I've been dropped off the back, or this is not a welcoming space. And wanted to bring on Eli and Jacob today. They are two of our chapter leaders who also just have a ton of experience in other parts of their lives in cultivating inclusive spaces, and wanted to talk about like what actually goes into making an event or a ride inclusive. And obviously, this is going to have like a bike slant to it and talking about bike rides, but I think what we're going to talk about is applicable to other types of activities. So let's read their bios real quick because these are some folks that are awesome, and I want to tell you about them more than just inclusive rides. So I'm going to read Jacob's. Do you want to read Eli's, Ellen?
Yes.
Okay. Jacob, that's a good start. Jacob, why can't I say your name? What is happening?
It's Jacob.
Thank you. It's because I'm smiling. Like, seeing their face makes me smile. Jacob Sheppard-Saidel, they, them, is a passionate advocate for sustainable transportation and outdoor recreation for everyone. They have over a decade of experience facilitating and cultivating community, leading outdoor events, and creating outdoor opportunities for all. Jacob works at the Venture Out Project, a nonprofit creating spaces for queer and trans folks to access outdoor adventure. Outside of the office, you can usually find Jacob on a bicycle, at a swimming hole, or in a tent. Or you may find them at one of the many events they host as a leader of the All Bodies on Bikes chapter in Western Massachusetts, where they're building inclusive community for all people to move their bodies joyfully. Beyond all of their outdoor advocacy, Jacob loves to cook, play music, take photos, and play games. Welcome to the show, Jacob.
Thank you so much for having me. Thanks for that introduction, Marley. I couldn't have said it better myself.
That was a great bio. I might copy it for myself.
Right. I thought you wrote your own bio, Jacob. Like,
they did.
Marley did a lot of really good research. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm very excited then to introduce Eli Kosko. They, them, is a bike nerd extraordinaire and integrates their love of bikes into all aspects of their life. As a recreational rider, professional bike mechanic, and safe routes and infrastructure advocate, they find the power and joy of bikes in everything they do and strive to share that as far and wide as possible. Eli works at the Esperanza Bicycle Safety Education Center, Albuquerque's fee-free bike shop and bike education facility. Eli loves spending all day outside on a bike, sharing in that joyful movement with others, empowering other riders with the skills they need for their bike maintenance journey, sharing knowledge, and helping others find their own bike joy. They practice this joy not only professionally, but through their volunteer work with All Bodies on Bikes, Bike ABQ, and bike packing routes. You can typically spot Eli riding any off-road, gravel path, commuting by bike, spending time walking and hiking with their dog Kingsley, and living out their second career on stage as a percussionist timpaniist in various orchestras and bands, which is so cool. Hi, Eli.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, thanks for having me. I don't have any funny quips like Jacob did. I did write that myself.
It's great. And I can attest to the fact I've seen Eli play the drums, and they are very good at it and very fun to watch. So
Thank you.
yeah, welcome to the show, you two. Thanks for taking the time to do this. So I'm going to start with a really hard hitter. Why do inclusive rides matter? Like, is this just like a feel good thing that we do because we're a bunch of softies and want everybody to feel good?
Obviously, yes. End of episode.
Maybe could I just answer that?
Yeah. My secret agenda in life and I've said this so many times, is I want to get everybody outside riding a bike. If you want to, I'm not here to force you into something you don't want to do. But if you have some inkling of being interested in bikes, I'm like, let's go. I can get you there. So for me, that can be literally anyone, even people who don't currently have a bike. And that's why inclusivity matters, because I don't want somebody to be like, well, I thought about riding, but I don't look like those people, or I don't ride as fast as those people, or whatever it is. And so it's like, no, you can do it.
Yeah, I also secretly, not so secretly, have the same agenda as Eli of getting everyone out on bikes. And I think it matters for a bunch of different reasons. I think there's a like really internal element to this, which is the like transformative properties of outdoor recreation and outdoor adventure. And I think it's really valuable to give everyone an opportunity to access that. It doesn't mean that this is necessarily the activity that they will stick to, or that outdoor adventure will be transformative for them. But I think for so many of us, we found it so meaningful. And yeah, providing those opportunities and allowing people a way in from whatever background they're coming from, I think is extremely important. Um, and then I think on, another side of things, I think ultimately, the more people on bikes, the better for so many other reasons. Thinking about safety of all of us on bikes, the more people that ride bikes, the more bike infrastructure that exists, the safer it is for everybody, the more access there is for people that aren't already like really motivated hardcore cyclists to ride their bikes places. And then that snowballs into climate action as far as the longevity of us living on this planet Earth as human beings, which, I say tongue in cheek, but is like an extremely serious
It's a very
thing
real
here.
thing.
100%.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. As far as just like, any person, anytime we can get someone out of a car for their trip across town, it's a win. And bike lanes do that. Other bike infrastructure does that. More places to park your bike, more bike lanes that are safer, protected, connected bike routes. So it's not just one lane on one busy road, and then what do you do from there? And the fact of the matter is that more people on bikes means that there's going to be more bike infrastructure, which makes it safer for more people to get on bikes and out of their cars. It means that more drivers are going to be aware and looking for bikes, which then makes it safer, so more people can get out of their bikes and onto their cars, or out of their
Yeah.
cars and onto their bikes. Yeah, no, really want to make sure people get onto their cars.
Just get on and rail against the man. Like, stand on your hood.
Exactly. Yeah.
Group rides can be like a gateway drug to more like outdoor recreation, like using your bike for more adventures. At least that was my case. Like I started commuting, but I really got into bikes once I started going on social rides and I felt like I had community. But on those rides, it also like taught me how to ride safely in the city and how to navigate, and opened up this world to me that like if I would have been just riding by myself, I wouldn't have been nearly as adventurous and exploring. So I think that's another big benefit to inclusive rides, is it shows that like biking across the city is possible, or biking to a park, or biking to wherever your group ride might be going. I think can be really helpful for folks who maybe have never considered biking as like a mode of transportation.
Yeah. I resonate with that. When I moved to Albuquerque a little over 2 years ago, I was pretty nervous to ride around in a new city, like ride around on the streets, and mostly stuck to the trails until I started attending some group rides and using that to like learn just the different safer routes and things that aren't necessarily on Google Maps, and being able to feel like I could navigate my new city more safely, and the ways to use public transportation to connect those things as well. The group rides really helped that. I was already a really avid rider, but there's always that nervous thing, and now I try, like if I'm traveling, I'm like going on a group ride somewhere is like a nice way to check out a city.
Yeah, love that. What defines an inclusive ride? Like, are there some hallmarks or like characteristics of these rides?
Yeah, that's a really hard hitting question, Marley. I think, and Honestly, it is, because it really cuts directly to the core of what it is that we're talking about. And I think there are elements that are, like, at the outset really easy to identify, and then some elements that are really soft and you have to feel. I think number one, that no one is dropped, that no one gets left behind on the ride is a really good indicator. If someone gets left behind, it's not an inclusive ride. I think other elements are that there's really clear information about what to expect on the ride, that there are leaders that are making everyone feel comfortable and welcomed and safe, that there isn't any aggression or upsetting behavior from any of the participants on that ride. Yeah. And then there's also soft things, just like you show up and you feel welcomed there. I mean, I think that's one of these biggest soft elements of an inclusive ride, is that whoever you are, wherever you're coming from, you're able to join and you're able to feel like this space is safe for me to be in. And as you're thinking about this event, you're not thinking, oh, am I allowed to be here? Do I have the right equipment or the right experience or the right kind of body or any of these things to be able to attend this event? Your questions might be like, oh, I can see really clearly how fast the ride is going to be and how long it's going to be. Do I feel like I'd be able to do that and have fun? Will I be included in this experience?
All of those things really hit home for me. Adding on to the sort of the soft skills portion of it is, not only am I welcome at this place, but do I feel comfortable to be fully myself when I arrive at this ride, whether that's on the bike that I love riding every day, in the clothes that I ride in, dressed exactly how I dress, and don't have to hide any portion of myself, which has a lot wrapped up in it for me and for other riders and stuff like that. So beyond even the technical skills needed to do a ride, is this a space where I'm going to be like, nobody's going to look twice at me, or nobody's going to look twice at some of the participants coming to my ride? And then in terms of like, not only are the ride leaders being welcoming and engaging with people attending, but is everybody there engaging with each other? Is everybody feeling like I can get along with all these people? I can make a conversation and meet new people at any given time on this ride.
I totally resonate with all that, and thinking as well about the kind of cultivation of that community where everybody in that space feels welcomed, and someone new can join and they will feel welcomed, and yeah, everyone feels totally able to bring their full self, whatever that looks like to them. I think those are like really powerful points.
Yeah, I think Jacob, you make a really good point of, would somebody new feel comfortable joining this ride? I think those of us that identify with all bodies on bikes, we've had that experience where we've been left behind or didn't feel included. And so thinking about, would I invite a friend who's newer to riding to this ride, is a benchmark for me of, is this ride inclusive or not?
Yeah. What I heard too is the group that is there is as much responsible for creating that atmosphere as you are as the leader. So it's your job as the leader to say, this is the space that I want and this is how it's going to be, but also then putting some of the responsibility and the pride in that feeling from the whole group.
I think that's something that a good leader, a good cultivator of spaces like this can really do. Well, they can really set the tone and expect the rest of the group to follow through community norms, through facilitation skills. Yeah.
That was basically what I
100%.
was going to say. But one thing we try and do with All Bodies on Bikes when training our chapter leaders, we just trained a whole new cohort, but is to really emphasize that the leaders set the tone, not just in welcomingness, but in terms of like safety, behavior norms, how we communicate with each other. So yes, it is on the participants, but it's usually not hard if you, as the leader, set the tone that we're going to be friendly, we're going to smile, we're going to welcome folks, we're going to say, hey, I'm so glad you're here. Other people will pick up on that vibe. Like, I've been to rides here in Bentonville where, similar to Eli, like, I'm not the leader, I'm just showing up as a participant. And you just emulate the vibe that is there when you get there. And that can be really awkward for me because I want to make everybody else feel welcome. But then there becomes this assumption that I'm the ride leader. And I'm like, oh no, I'm just here to play. I'm here to ride bikes.
I feel like I've been in that position before. I have a distinct scenario in mind that I think about and try to never emulate. And I showed up to a ride one time, like as the first time attending this well-established ride, and it was like me meet up before the ride, and then the ride starts like 15 minutes later or whatever. And I was there, and I was like, oh, hey, I'm Eli, like, blah, blah, blah. And then somebody in the group was like, oh, we'll do introductions, like, in a bit. And I was like, I don't know anyone though. Am I just gonna sit here quietly? It was the weirdest thing, and it set the tone. I was just like, yep, this was weird. I used to host a ride in Kansas City that it was never clear whether people were coming just to ride on the trail or coming for the group that I was hosting. And I would, every time somebody be walking up, I'd be like, hey, are you here for this thing? And sometimes they were, sometimes they weren't. And they were like, what are you talking about? And then we were like, nah, just come anyway.
Right.
But Eli, what if someone ended up introducing themselves to you twice? That could be a really big problem.
I
don't
know,
you think?
Definitely, because I always remember people's names on the first time, and I never
Yeah.
need somebody to say it a second time. Like,
No, of
please
course.
do not repeat yourself.
Yeah. We'll do introductions later. We can't.
Yeah.
I don't want to know your name right now.
Yeah, exactly.
But also, that's like one of the easiest ways to make sure people do feel like included is like immediately make eye contact, immediately say hey, and like bring them into your space, right? Like that is so odd. What a
It was-
good example.
It was weird.
Well, let's talk about the nuts and bolts of inclusive rides. Everybody thinks they can lead an inclusive ride and thinks that they're capable of it. But I know that it takes more work than that. So I would love to hear from you all, soup to nuts. I don't understand that expression, but like A to Z.
Is that
How
an
do you-
actual expression?
I've never heard that.
You never heard soup to nuts?
I've
No.
heard it, but I also where
What
does that come
nuts?
from?
Yeah,
Hang on, we need to
don't
take
know.
a
What kind
quick
of
break
soup?
to look up the
What kind of soup?
etymology here.
This is
Okay,
now
well-
a soup to nuts podcast.
Yeah, soup to nuts. I've heard it. I don't know. But, you get this idea of like, hey, I want to lead a group ride, all the way to it's the day of. What are you going through? What does your process look like? Take us through it.
Take us away, Jacob, with your detailed Excel spreadsheet.
Oh gosh.
We're not even lying. Jacob does have an Excel spreadsheet.
Tell me more.
I
Say it in slow, salacious detail.
have an Excel spreadsheet for a lot of things. This particular spreadsheet is just a really easy way to track all of the different little tasks that go into putting a ride together, and then based on the date of the ride, when they all need to be completed, and whether you're on track for success or you gotta do a little extra work this week.
For heaven, right there.
Yeah.
I tell you what, I'm breathing heavy over here. I just got hit my COVID.
Oh my gosh.
What
Yeah,
are some of
big
those
fan.
tasks?
Well, so I think one of the most important places to start with putting an inclusive ride together is like understanding who your audience is and who you're making this ride for specifically. There's all different kinds of ways to make your ride inclusive, but if you have a specific audience, for example, I'm trying to reach a group of people who work in retail, right? Hosting that ride on Tuesday at noon, those people might not be available. So thinking about when your audience can be available, what specific barriers are in their way of getting to that ride and having a really good time, and then starting from the offset to try from the get-go to try to identify ways of removing those barriers. So I think that's a really important place to start, is not just like jumping right in, oh, the ride's going to be here, it's going to be at this time, it's going to look like this, but like starting from that really big picture brainstorming. Who is this ride for? What are the needs of this audience?
I want to dig into this a little bit, because I think what happens is people think inclusive means I have to be trying to cater to everyone. But what you just said actually is no, you can narrow the focus to cater to one specific audience that has been othered in order to bring them in. Like you have to speak to them directly in order to make it inclusive. So it's kind of this inverse idea, that purposeful language of speaking their language to say, this is also for you, and here, let me show you in this way.
For sure, Ellen. I think another really important factor here is how it fits into what already exists in your community. And so I think a lot of the times we see a lot of rides are happening like Saturday mornings, right?
Mm-hmm.
But for example, a role that I've been in for many years is working at bike shops, and most bike shop employees work on Saturdays. So how is the person at the bike shop going to be able to get to that ride, inclusive or otherwise, if every single ride's on a Saturday morning? So, for sure, just because of how time works, not every single thing is going to be accessible by every single person just because of scheduling. but starting from like, okay, where is there a gap? Who's the audience? Who am I intending to reach out to that's been systemically left out, so I can bring them in? What are the issues they have, and what are the ways I can address those barriers to allow them to access this kind of programming?
Love that. Anything to add, Eli? You've thought about who your audience is. What are some other things that go into an inclusive ride? Like, do you have a pre-ride talk, expectation setting, marketing? Just curious about that.
Yeah, definitely. I think in marketing, one of the key things is like, if you're trying to be inclusive and make sure that either certain people or everyone feel welcome, and this is like maybe seemingly a standard marketing thing, but they should be represented in like maybe in the photos or something that we're posting, or if I'm posting videos and stuff like that. If I'm showing a ride, and I think that it can be done on any bike. So if I'm like putting together a ride that it's like you don't have to be on a mountain bike or a road bike specifically, then maybe I'm going to include all different types of bikes in those photos where I'm saying that this ride is coming up, making sure that visually you might see yourself represented in like what we're doing. And then definitely giving a pre-ride talk, setting the stage. And there's an element of like intrinsically when I show up somewhere, I'm like, I look a way that I look, and I'm going to expect that people are seeing me as a very just straight up queer trans person. That's like, we're going to be tolerant of that. And if you're not, I think I would hope you would just like maybe turn around and walk away, and I don't have to have that conversation with you, but I do like to set that stage. I think some simple ways that I try to show inclusivity without like being blunt in someone's face is introducing myself and my pronouns. Sometimes I'll do an introductory question that's breaking down some barriers instead of like, hey, what's your favorite bike to ride, but something that doesn't have anything to do with that. What's your favorite like holiday food is a really good one, which is nice because you get a lot of different cultural references and questions like that. I definitely try and set the stage by being who I am, and also setting the tone for making sure that people know that this is a space where we welcome all people, riders, different styles. But like to Jacob's point, in terms of like maybe we're gonna do a ride that's like at a certain time of day to reach a certain audience. Sometimes you're doing like a mountain biking ride, so like maybe there's a little bit of skill level or something that goes into that, or a specific type of bike. And one of the ways that I try to make those more inclusive is like, hey, if you don't have this bike, I have access to a lot of bikes, either my own or friends or something like that. So I'll be like, hey, you can hit me up if you think maybe you don't know if your bike is equipped for this, or you don't have a bike. So breaking down inclusivity barriers by offering equipment is another way.
Just going to like one of the first and one of the last things that you were saying, which is like about that equipment piece. And to me, I think one of the biggest marketing things is really sharing a ton of information about the ride, trying to make it as clear and concise as possible, but really hitting on these major points, right? Not just where are we meeting and what time are we meeting, but like what time are we actually leaving from the spot that we say we're meeting at? What kind of equipment do you need? So this is what the route is, all of the route information. This is how long it is. This is how many feet of climbing it is. These are any specifically challenging points. And that could be thinking broadly, what's challenging, right? Someone on a tricycle is going to have a really challenging time making it through a really narrow set of barriers, or getting up on top of a curb for some reason. They might not even be able to do that. Someone that's not very experienced with riding on busy streets is going to have a tough time riding on a busy road, even for just a few hundred feet. Someone that has different ability levels or different strength levels, or has a different level of experience with hills, might have a harder time getting up a really steep hill. So trying to identify any of those challenging points in that ride description so people know what to expect. And then with that, what kind of bike do you need to bring? I've hosted rides where it's like, this ride is fully paved. Any bicycle, any tricycle, any wheels you have is going to be great. I've hosted rides that's like, this is a mountain bike ride. Your bike should have at least this size tires. They should be knobby where they have a little bit of extra grip, and really everything in between. But I think that identification, that like pre-set of information is really crucial. And then, yeah, as Eli was saying, like when people arrive, really setting the stage there. I have like a script, basically, a template for a pre-ride talk that I like will tweak depending on the ride, but that's first of all is like front loading that information again. So people sign up for things, they're not always so good at reading all of the fine print, even if it's really big and right in front of them.
Even if it's large print.
Even if it's
Yeah.
large print,
Yeah.
really. And I mean, ultimately, people just learn in different ways. So not everybody can learn from reading on a website. Sometimes you need to tell them about it. So really reiterating some of that information. This is how long the ride is. This is what kind of terrain we're going to get to. These are the kind of key points. And then, yeah, it's really crucial to have community norms for the space we're sharing. So I've got a nice bunch of those. And then to Eli's point about like making sure everyone feels welcome, especially folks in our queer and trans community, one of the community norms that I use is don't assume anyone's pronouns. And if you don't know, you can use a they pronoun or ask them politely. But I think that's pretty clear that anyone that doesn't think pronouns are real will leave at that point. And that's great because that's a way that we, as leaders, do that work of setting the tone so that everybody in that space is a welcoming person for anyone that shows up.
And it can be a big signal, even as an ally, as someone who, like, I have the pronouns that you'd expect to see with my particular face. But it's like, if I just very casual, nonchalantly say, it's like, hey, my name's Ellen and my pronouns are she, her, like, it opens the door of saying, I'm welcoming that from you as well.
Yeah.
And I am saying I expect these to be respected and from my space of allyship.
I've been in a space where I'm like, it goes around this entire circle and then it comes to me and then I say my pronouns and I'm the first person to have said my pronouns. It's a sense of othering and I'm like,
Exactly.
yeah, damn, I'm having to say my pronouns because otherwise people are going to be like, what? But I have to say my pronouns because I want you to know my pronouns. Yeah, I appreciate that from you,
Yeah,
Ellen.
and I think the through line here too is like the explicitness of the inclusivity, right? Of saying this is an inclusive ride and here's how. Even to, I like, Jacob, your points about like the FAQs and the restating things. The group that I lead in Kansas City is a family bike ride. And so like thinking of like, what does a family need to know? If you have young kids, what do you want to know? And so like I have an FAQ about, do we or don't we have snacks? How do you get out of this if my kid is melting down? Like, it's stuff that a different audience isn't going to care about. You know, me as the ride leader who at the time had a 2-year-old and now it's a 4-year-old, just a bit of like, I have had my kid sobbing on the back of my bike before. I have understood the importance of having goldfish in my panniers. Like, how do we make sure that you understand that's like this, you can show up as your authentic parenting self and not have to feel like that's the barrier. So just as a hard example of speaking the language of whoever your audience is. And of course, like, I think everyone would have an open door policy anyway, but like trying to anticipate it as much so that they understand that you understand them. And they're not going to have to try to come to you and say, for whatever reason, I feel othered, and here are my specific other concerns that you have not yet addressed.
I think that's a really great.
Sorry. I was just going to say, when you do cultivate that welcoming, inclusive environment, if there are other concerns that haven't been addressed, hopefully that person then also feels comfortable saying, hey, I also need this accommodation. Can we figure it out? And that's been my experience with All Bodies on Bikes is there are things that we don't do right. And there are things that we mess up on and things that we don't know. Being open and willing to get feedback has been awesome for us. And we have learned so much. And like, we've improved our training of the chapter leaders and we have Jacob's spreadsheet and like really just working through these things. Because sometimes things happen. Things go sideways and get messed up. Sorry, Jacob, what were you going to say?
No, that's actually really lends itself right into one of the points I wanted to make, which is ultimately any goal of inclusivity is not a checkbox that you get to say, I've done it, we're inclusive, now we can move on from this. It's really a continual process of learning and growing and working. And so I think that's something that a lot of people miss is that they say, great, I did the inclusive ride leader training, now I'm an inclusive ride leader. And I don't have to learn anything else. I know what this is. And I think that that is something that we do really well is that we're listening for feedback, but I think we're also looking to keep learning. And so I think a great example of this for me is I've partnered with a group locally called All Out Adventures that does outdoor adventure programming for folks with disabilities. And when we were partnering on a ride, one of the things that they told me is for our community, bathroom access is really important. If we're going out for 2 hours, we need to know where bathrooms are along the route because people need to use the bathroom. And that's really important. And that to me hadn't been something that I was planning around. I was like, great, if there's a bathroom at the start and the finish, we're probably fine. And yeah, for different people with different abilities, with different backgrounds, with different bodies, there are different things that are necessary. I think that's something where it's really that continual learning process, and really valuing that seeking out information, where we're not just waiting for someone to come to us and say, hey, I had a problem with this ride. And of course, when they do, we will address that and we will fix it. But ideally, we're also doing a lot of that. What are the ways that I can learn about how to keep working on my inclusivity and making sure that these rides really meet the broadest amount of needs from my community?
Yeah. One thing that I wanted to talk specifically with you two about, because I think you do a really good job of this, is like longer, more challenging, adventuresome rides that are still inclusive. Because I think a lot of folks get challenged to say, we want this ride to be inclusive. And then it's like, okay, it needs to be a 5 mile cruise at 5 miles an hour. How do y'all accommodate and work towards more challenging rides that are also inclusive?
I think the key thing is in your question, work towards. This past fall, I did a series that was like working towards a longer, and I think Jacob, you did the same thing maybe a year ago, a series of sort of building block rides that had an end goal in mind. And maybe some people are already at the point where they could just like walk out the door and do that end goal, and then maybe some people are like, actually I want to get to that, and then maybe some people are like, whatever, I don't even know. So we were doing an overnighter that had a certain length. It was at an elevation, had certain elevation changes, and on a certain terrain. And I was like, okay, those are the main points that I want to make sure that anybody who wants to do this ride is prepared and ready to do. And so in order to do that, I just provided opportunities for people to build their skills and their confidence, as well as like practice all of those elements. So since it was a bikepacking trip, we also coupled it with educational series, as well as loaning out of some gear and some rides where it's like you can weigh yourself down more with these bags and stuff like that. And then just a weekly series of increasing distance, varied terrain, making sure I hit elements of the elevation that were involved, and then partnered with the local rider here on doing this like pretty big adventure ride that was actually like above and beyond what the distance for the bikepacking event would be, but one that you can do without the bags and all that kind of stuff. So I was kind of like, I've done a couple both long distance gravel rides, as well as like I used to do some like ultra running and stuff like that. Just taking those elements of training that I know I had to do for myself to physically get to a distance, and putting that into the terms of all bodies on bikes, making sure that people felt like they could achieve that distance without even realizing it, I think was one of the things when I'm talking about specifically increasing mileage. It's a thing that I'd be riding with folks and be like, in my head, I'm like, I know that you can do this already, but you've never done it. You've never tried it. So what if I just like snuck it in there by next week, we're adding a couple extra miles and they don't even know. It's like sometimes just doing
Oh
some
my
of
God.
that sneaky.
Eli, you're so sneaky.
Sneaky
Yeah.
You're
inclusivity.
so mischievous.
I know. And also I am not sneaky because I said all of this out loud to all of them that I was doing this. But I think that it worked, and it was something that I didn't achieve alone. I had a lot of help, and also called upon some of those people who I knew were interested in this ride to help lead those rides. We just called it like a training build-up series, I think. But yeah, maybe that's my tactic for that, is sneakily preparing you for that by introducing you to these elements, and then at the end of it, you're like, oh, I was able to do that. And hopefully along the way, you find out that it was a fun thing to do.
Eli, that ride series looked like so much fun. I was so jealous that I couldn't be in Albuquerque to do that. It looked like such a blast.
The funny, or not funny, but the ultimate thing that ended up happening is a freak snowstorm, though, on the weekend of the overnighter. So we never actually did it. So it is rescheduled for this coming May. But yeah, so we ended up not, like, I mean, beautiful weather leading all the way up to it. And then it was like hypothermic conditions. And I was like, I think we're going to cancel the overnighter. But everybody was really ready. Everybody was prepared.
Everyone was so prepared.
Yeah.
Well, as Eli was mentioning, I've done some similar like build-up rides, but also some like adventure-y, longer, harder rides that didn't have build-up. And I think part of what I'm thinking about here goes back to this idea of who's your audience. So I think those build-up rides are really amazing for working with an audience of folks that are more beginners or don't have the fitness or the experience to jump out and do a longer 20-mile ride, 30-mile ride. But then I think there is an audience of folks that do have that experience, that do have that fitness, but are still seeking out community with others in an inclusive way to do those kinds of rides, where they don't want to just join the fully cis white rich dude club ride. They don't want to just do these rides by themselves. They want to join with other folks that are going to make them feel welcomed. And for stuff like that, I think one of the keys is that information overload, where it's like, here's everything you need to know about this ride, making sure people know what they're getting into. And then, yeah, we've hosted some just amazing adventure rides, 10, 12, 15 miles, 2 or 3 hours on the bike, where we've got just a group of really wonderful folks that are coming out and doing it. And it doesn't always work out perfect. We did a ride, and it's one of those things that you don't really expect when 15 people sign up and then 40 people show up. And you're like, oh, shit, this is going to be fun. This is going to be great. Everyone's beautiful and wonderful, and I love all of you, and we're going to go ride bikes. But the other thing that happens sometimes is that people just join in. People just see like a group of people riding bikes, and they're like, I'm on a bike. I'm going to join you. And sometimes those people might be unprepared for the adventurousness of the route because they didn't hear the pre-ride talk, or they didn't sign up on the website. They just saw a group of people riding bikes and, like Eli, did a little sneaky. And then you're in a pretty off-road section and they get a flat tire, and you're like, oh yeah, that's probably not the right bike for this. And then you fix their flat tire and then you finish the ride. Sometimes that can happen when you're doing adventure rides with 40 people.
Not speaking from experience at all.
No,
on
I
that.
can
No,
tell.
Yeah.
Could happen.
I think we've all been in that situation. And I think if you set the tone that we're all going to be there for each other, it turns what could be a very frustrating situation into okay, we're going to eat snacks while people change their flat, and it's going to be perfectly fine.
And everyone's prepared, and everyone has lights, and the ride leader might have a few extra sets of lights in case someone didn't read all the instructions and didn't bring their lights, and all of those good things. But yeah, always an adventure, and that's one of the fun things, is that it is an adventure, right? We're not doing things that we know exactly how they're going to turn out when we set out to do them. That's one of the things that makes it impactful and transformative, and that's one of the things that makes it really fun to do in an environment where you feel like you can try something hard, try something that will push you a little bit, and feel like you're going to be okay. You're safe enough to do something that feels maybe a little bit unsafe, to do something that feels a little bit of a stretch for you, and that you're going to be okay with that.
I think when we had our chapter leader retreat and we were talking about the different kinds of bike rides that we wanted to put on as an organization, I think we called those kinds of rides fat people can do hard things too, or something along those lines. Because there's always the assumption that like fat people only want to do short, slow rides or something like that. But people of all sizes and shapes like to do stupid things on bikes that are hard. So
like stupid things on bikes. Come on, we can give ourselves a little more credit than that. But
sometimes the things we do are stupid things on bikes. I have many stories.
Yes.
Okay, fair enough.
I think it's a term of endearment to say, oh yeah, I'm going to go do some stupid things on bikes. Like things that, why would you do that on a bike? Why not just not do that? It's like, because it's really fun, but it is really stupid.
Why am I signed up to ride 100 miles the first weekend of June in Kansas? Like, I would consider that a stupid thing on a bicycle.
Sounds great to me.
Great life experience, right? The last question on this is, how does the virtual world fit into all of this? We're recording this in the middle of winter. Not everybody can get out across the country because there's polar vortices and who knows what else. Is Zwift... Are these things like, what does this look like to make an inclusive Zwift ride?
I can chime in on this because we actively do this with All Bodies on Bikes. And I want to caveat this by saying there are inherent problems with virtual rides. They have access barriers. Having an indoor trainer is expensive. Paying for Zwift can be expensive. So by its very nature, it's going to exclude some people, and that sucks. But for those who do have a trainer or who have the equipment to ride indoors, Zwift is a great platform for it. However, you have to seek out the inclusive rides, because if you join a random group ride, they are often like a race style format where folks are just trying to go faster and harder than other people. And then you lose the group, and then you're like, cool, why am I doing this? So what we do at All Bodies on Bikes is we've got a couple social rides throughout the week now on Zwift. Those will taper off during the summer, but right now we use what's called the rubber band feature. So it keeps the whole group together as we're riding, regardless of what pace each person is going at. We also put up a Discord and we just chat with each other, which the first time I was introduced to this concept, I was like, why in the world would I turn on my camera and talk to people while I'm heavy breathing and riding this indoor bicycle? And now I love it. Like, I do it most Monday nights, and I talk to folks from across the country, and we don't always talk. If we're climbing a hill, there's a lot less talking, but it does feel like a regular group ride where
I was going to say, it sounds like real life.
Yeah.
it's exactly what it is. It's cool.
That's so cool. I had not heard the Discord edition.
If folks want to join in, if you find the All Bodies on Bikes club on Zwift, join the club, and then you'll get notified of the different events. So,
oh, nice.
Yeah. I would love for Eli and Jacob to give a shout out to their individual chapters, and maybe if you've got anything planned or in the works or things to look forward to, and it's okay if not, but where can they find you as well?
Yeah, so I am the chapter leader for the Albuquerque chapter, so in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And the thing definitely for sure on the books is coming up is retrying the bikepacking overnighter from the fall that we got weathered out of. We're going to do that same series leading up to it, just to scoop everyone back in. I think we're very lucky here in Albuquerque. I can ride pretty much year round. Right now it's quite cold, but even in the middle of the day, it's really sunny and warm. People are still out there riding and keeping confident on their handling and stuff like that. But yeah, we'll do that same building series, get anybody who missed the first one on bikepacking basics. But we're looking at May 10th to 11th.
Cool. And we'll have that info up on the All Bodies on Bikes website soon. Just allbodiesonbikes.com/events. Jacob, what's going on in Western Mass?
Sounds great. So you can find us on Instagram, because we just love Instagram. ABOB, ABOB _ Western Mass. We're working on a calendar for 2025. One of the things I do expect will be coming up soon, but has not yet been scheduled or planned, will be a little Sugar Shack ride. So I don't know if this is something where any of y'all are from, but up here in the Northeast, where there's maple trees, when it's sugaring season, the Sugar Shacks are open. They're making syrup all day and night. They're just boiling, and you just come on in. They got like pancakes and all kinds of yummy stuff to eat. And this is one of the things everyone's complaining about, the cold, but here in the Northeast, we love the cold. I think we'll have a few people out for one of my favorite things, honestly, which is a bike ride that ends in something to eat.
When is sugaring season?
That's a great question. You'd probably have to ask a farmer, an arborist, someone that knows more than me. I just know that sometime in February or March, I'm like, oh shit, I should probably go to the Sugar Shack. So, but yeah, so that's probably the soonest thing. But we'll be working on a calendar. We'll probably be doing another bunch of rides in May, which is Bike Month. So we do a bunch of programming. Then we'll probably be doing another class on Bikepacking 101, a class on Bike Commuting 101. We'll probably be doing, hopefully, another Swift camp out this year, which is always a favorite. And then, yeah, another Pride ride as well in June. Just a bunch of rides throughout the year. So, yeah, stay in touch on the old Instagram. You can also send us an email, which is up on our website, on the All Bodies on Bikes website, if you want to get on the mailing list so you don't have to go on Instagram to find out what's going on.
Awesome.
Fantastic.
Yeah, you know what? Also, myself, Jacob, and Marley have coming up where if you are not in one of our local chapters but want to come say hey and are heading to Mid-South, so we'll be there.
Ellen will be there too.
Oh,
I'll
and
be there
Ellen.
too.
Okay.
Oh my God, the
party.
whole
So if you just want to
gang.
hear this exact conversation again, you can find us at. No, I'm just kidding about that.
This is all we talk about. Yeah, but this is all
This is the only thing
say,
we talk
basically.
about.
This is the only
Yeah,
thing
Zero
we
other
talk
topic.
Turn the microphone on at any point during a conversation. This is what you're going to hear.
Yeah.
I mean, not far off.
Yeah, it's like,
It's so
we talk
true.
about bikes a lot.
Yeah.
Well, this
Yeah,
has been
Mid-South is
absolutely
going to be great.
Yeah, this has been awesome. Thank you both so much for the work that you do and this really enlightening conversation. Really
Thanks for
appreciate you
having
two.
us.
Yeah,
this was
thank
great.
you. Yeah.
Thank you.